I want you to calm down and take a deep breath, because today's story is really special. Relax, inhale deeply, and get ready to dive into an amazing tale. You're stepping into a medieval famine year. The weather has turned against you, the granaries are bare, and the Lord still wants his dues. Even if your family is running on boiled weeds and tears, this isn't just a bad harvest. It's a slow, grinding descent into hunger that doesn't pinch so much as devour. Quick thing before we dive in. If you enjoy these stories, hit like and subscribe. It really helps me out and helps this new channel reach 50K subscribers this month. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. You wake to frost feathering the inside of your thatched cottage. The fire died again. Fuel is too precious to waste on sleep. Outside, the fields are pale and iron-hard, last year's stubble dotted with stones and broken stalks, but very little hope. In a normal year, you'd be mending tools and eyeing seed for spring. Not this year. There's almost nothing to mend, even less to plant. Last summer never stopped raining. Crops flattened, low meadows drowned, wheat rotted on the stalk, barley mildewed in the sacks. You remember hauling up a clump of leeks and finding them melted to mush. Your neighbor slaughtered his pigs early rather than watch them starve. The salted meat spoiled anyway. The communal granary is down to dust. Your own stores are gone. You stretched them as far as you could, cutting bread with ground beans, husks, even bark. But you knew deep in the ache of your gut it wouldn't last to spring. Hunger lives with you now. It makes your body feel hollow and your thoughts thin. Your child sleeps by the cold hearth, stick-thin in a tunic you've restitched a dozen times, eyes too large for that sharp little face. You haven't felt hunger in days, just a grey static humming under the ribs. Still you have to move. Maybe the miller will trade a handful of millet for that cracked wooden spoon. Mud sucks at your worn shoes as you take the common path. Faces you know pass by, drawn, quiet, each with an empty bowl and a plan that probably won't work. The Lord Steward rode through last week demanding grain as if the fields had overflowed. He took what he could find, more out of principle than need. You watched the pale, fraying sacks trundle away and listened to the crying afterward. Your neighbor hid his last bushel under kindling. His wife panicked and gave it up. 4 days now, no one's seen either of them. Medieval peasants always carried famine in the corner of their eye, but this is worse. The woods are empty of rabbits. Even the birds are gone. Yesterday's snare came up clean, bait untouched. Spring planting feels like a joke when your body has started feeding on itself. At the village edge, a few people huddle around a fire of peat and dung. The stench is terrible. No one complains. Someone's rumored to be boiling shoe leather. Another swears there are mushrooms under the eastern oaks. Dangerous hope. In good years, mushrooms are a gamble. In bad ones, they're a blade you test with your tongue. A woman, wild-eyed, tells of her grandfather mixing clay with goose fat during the Great Famine of 1315. She offers it like both warning and recipe. Someone else mutters about the abbey's hunger bread, tasting of sawdust and sour apples. Better than nothing, but only just. Historically, years like this came in waves. The Great Famine of 1315-1317 followed overcrowded fields, exhausted soils, and relentless rain. Transport was poor. A decent harvest 2 valleys over might as well be on the moon. Scholars argue whether famine corrected the population, a cold phrase that erases human pain, or whether communities adapted through cooperation and foraging modern people barely remember. You're trying to prove the latter. Barely. A stranger ladles thin something into your bowl. You don't ask what. It tastes of ash water with the ghost of a turnip. Your stomach clenches grateful anyway. Across the fire, someone hums a festival tune from the last good harvest. It feels like a dream. You let it hold you a minute. Tomorrow you'll dig the hedgerows for wild onions. Maybe you'll risk the mushrooms. Tonight you will sleep with a belly not quite empty. That is victory now. By morning the broth's mercy is gone. In its place, the old hollow tightness and the fog. You move because you must. The wind threads through the door planks. The room smells of cold earth and old straw. In the corner waits your treasure. A single barley round, hard and dark. You saw it in half with a knife honed down to a whisper. The crumb is gritty, tangy from bean flour and whatever wild seeds you threw in for bulk. You chew slow. Hurry would feel like betrayal. Barley is peasant grain, stubborn, reliable, never glorious. In good years, you'd mix it with oats and a dab of lard, maybe a streak of honey if the bees were kind. In famine, you mix it with desperation. Pea hulls, ground fava pods, scraped bran, sometimes chalk sifted fine enough to pass. Dignity doesn't feed children, calories do. Outside, the world is smoke and mud. A neighbor's door hangs open, hearth dead. You don't look inside. There's been enough of that this week. In the green, people trade crumbs of news about acorn bread. It can be done. Leach the tannins for days, changing water again and again. But who has time when the body is gnawing its own bones? You'd eat it anyway. An old woman shares thin wedges of her barley disc, scored with a clumsy X. She dunks each bite in water to soften the crust. You copy her, wetting a corner of your loaf in the trough. The water tastes like wood and iron. It helps. No one talks while eating. Famine makes prayer of chewing. There's a superstition: never eat the last bite of a famine loaf. The first to finish, the first to die. You don't say you don't believe. Belief feels safer than doubt right now. A boy tears at his bread as if it might run. His mother watches with the specific silent guilt of famine parents. You know it too. The church bell tolls once, long, not mass, burial. No one hurries. There's no strength for hurrying. Everyone already knows the name. Maybe old, maybe young. In years like this, both. Records say that in true famine, bread stopped being bread. Paste eaten raw. Grain mashed into water and warmed by sun. No yeast, no rise, the sacred symbol reduced to fuel. In towns, people queued for the sweepings behind bakeries. In the country, you are the bakery, and your oven is a pit lined with stone and hope. Scholars still argue how universal the recipes were: barley stretched with pea meal, bark flours, acorn cakes. Some say they were common knowledge, passed like heirlooms. Others think they were desperate improvisations shared by rumor and luck. Either way, you keep moving. Because out here, survival isn't a lesson you memorize. It's a lesson you live, one bite, one rumor, one thin breath at a time. Others argue that most peasants simply improvised, that survival came down to what you had, who you knew, and how desperate you were. There's probably truth in both. You've learned more from your neighbors in the past 2 months than you ever did during all those carefree harvest festivals. Later in the day, you spot a figure hobbling along the edge of the fields. He's carrying something wrapped in a cloth. Word spreads quickly. He's from the next village over and brought barley flour to trade. No one asks where he got it. No one wants to know. He asks for lard or smoked meat or a copper spoon. You offer the other half of your loaf and the promise of one clean wool mitten. He doesn't take it. Others offer better. You watch the flour disappear into someone else's hands, and just like that, your hope shrinks again. You spend the rest of the afternoon scavenging. Under the eaves of the barn, you find a clump of dried moss, not edible. Under the hedge, a few wilted dandelions. You chew the stems bitter, but they fool your mouth into thinking something's coming. Back at home, your daughter is curled up on the floor, sleeping more now than waking. You lie beside her, pull the thin blanket up to both chins, and listen to her shallow breaths. Tomorrow, maybe you'll try boiling bark again. The morning air hits your face like a slap from someone who doesn't care if you wake up or not. It's grey again. No sun, no Sue, no snow. Just that dull, endless cold that presses against your skin and seeps into your joints. You're getting used to it. You've stopped expecting warmth, just like you've stopped expecting full meals or sleep without dreams of food. The ground is hard and lumpy, littered with frozen footprints and chicken droppings from birds no one's seen for a week. Most were eaten or wandered off or just stopped laying and became too expensive to keep alive. You chew on a thought. Oats. You haven't had oats in weeks. It used to be your fallback when the bread ran out. Thick oat porridge with a pinch of salt, maybe some chopped leeks or wild garlic if you were feeling fancy. But now even oats are scarce. You think you saw someone trading a whole iron nail for a bowl of oat gyar. One nail. That's how far the world has fallen. Still, for oats are more forgiving than wheat or rye. They grow in rough soils and survive the frost better, and when they are around, they fill your belly in a way that sticks. You dream about them sometimes in bowls the size of your head, steaming with honey or goose fat melting on top. Those are good dreams, cruel but good. Today you're heading out toward the edge of the manlands, where the peas and beans used to grow. It's late in the season for anything edible, but maybe you'll find a few dried pods still clinging to the plants or dropped between the furrows, missed by the gleaners. You bring your woven basket, though there's not much optimism in your grip. You reach the field by mid-morning. The earth is stiff, half frozen, but there are remnants. Dry vines like brittle fingers curling up from the ground. You crouch and start searching. It takes time. You're slower than you used to be. Your knees cack when you bend. Your fingers fumble in the cold and your thoughts are sluggish. Hunger slows everything except your heartbeat, which thuds loudly in your ears with every movement. Eventually, you find a pod, one single wrinkled pea still inside. You stare at it like it's a coin or a pearl or a promise. You pop it in your mouth before you can think better of it, crunching it between your teeth. It tastes like dust and memory. Someone else is in the field too, an old man hunched, moving slowly along the rows with a long stick. He nods to you without speaking. He's not competition. No one is. Not really. Everyone's picking over the same bones. He jerks his chin toward the tree line. You follow to a scuffed patch of earth where a few hard, shrunken beans lie like pebbles. You gather them one by one, careful, reverent, maybe enough to boil into something that passes for food. In a year like this, peas and beans are gifts. Legumes have always been the quiet heroes of the medieval table. Dry well, keep well, feed the blood. They even heal tired soil, though you don't know the word nitrogen, only that these plants are good to you and to the ground. This year, even their ghosts are worth gratitude. Back home, you tip your haul on the table, a small heap of beans, a few dry pea husks, a threadbare twist of chickweed from the hedge. Not much, but it's a plan. Plans are rare now. You crack the beans with the heel of your hand on a flat stone and simmer them with the last of your dried nettles. The smell is earthy, neither welcome nor terrible, like something that used to be food. When it's ready, you ladle a little into a chipped wooden bowl and lift it to your daughter's lips. She barely wakes, blinks, sips. "Thank you," she whispers, hands trembling around the bowl. You wonder how many more days she can manage. Old ones still talk about famines past, especially that hard winter when people cooked their seed grain. Without seed, there's no spring. Without spring, no next year. You swore you wouldn't. You even hid a pouch of peas beneath the hearthstone. Last week, you dug it up and boiled it. Oaths don't stand long against a child's ribs. There's a tidy debate among scholars about whether peasants thought short-term or long. As if poverty makes you simple. You knew exactly what those seed peas meant. You also knew what not eating them would mean. By evening, the word goes round. The steward comes tomorrow, bringing news, maybe bread, maybe punishments for arrears. Hard to say which is worse. You sweep the cold dirt floor, fold ragged blankets, stack cracked bowls as if order might soften judgment. Presentation counts, especially now. You sit by the embers, watching them glow like coals from a saner world. You remember when food had color and texture and didn't taste like pleading. The first time your girl ate boiled peas, she called them green candy. You both laughed. Tonight there's only the scrape of a spoon, the tick of cooling wood, wind pressing the wattle wall. You fall asleep with bean taste on your tongue. Morning brings a smell that isn't yours. Smoke, yes, but green-edged, sharp. Someone's cooking outside. You wrap your shawl and drift that way, casual like a cat. No one believes casual anymore. Hunger is a smell you wear, a fold in the shoulders. A woman tends a pot, tipping in careful handfuls of leaves. Her boy huddles beside her, eyes too old. "What is it?" you ask softly. "Dock, sorrel, nettle," she says, not looking up. "Found a little ground elder." You nod like you knew already. You mostly do. Nettles sting now and feed later. Sorrel is lemon and warning. Dock fills space. They're making pottage, water and weeds instead of barley, salt or meat. You offer to watch the fire. She says no, but her eyes say yes. Silence is your payment. Foraging has become a tax everyone pays, to the hedges, the ditches, the margins of memory. You comb through your grandmother's stray sentences, goosefoot, fat hen, fairy tale names that turn out to be rations. You keep a running litany in your head. Nettles, chickweed, cleavers, dandelion, mallow, shepherd's purse. Most of it is bitter, grassy, or rude on the tongue, but it doesn't kill you. There's a grim satisfaction in turning wild leaves into a bowl of heat. Maybe that's where you're headed. Not this week. Scholars argue about weeds. Seasonal food or last-ditch famine fare? You suspect both. The greens float in cloudy water like seaweed in a dying tide pool. You plan your own pot the moment you're home. You wrap your hands and go. The world has changed. Not the land, but your gaze. You come back with sorrel, nettles, dandelion, and a thin bouquet of garlic mustard plucked from a fence gap. You build a mean little fire of twigs and dung. The smoke stings, but heat is heat. Spring soup, you tell her, as if it's a treat. She doesn't smile, but her eyes soften. It's enough. The bell tolls again. No one looks surprised. You lie down with a belly not quiet but not clawing. A victory of sorts. You think about the greens you didn't recognize. Tomorrow, you'll ask. The poor write their knowledge in hands and tongues, not in books. At dawn you wake hungry, of course, but with a new scent in the air. Sweet, oily, earthy, nuts. The forest calls. You tell your daughter to keep warm. You'll bring back something, anything. The woods belong to the Lord, like the fields and some days the sky. He isn't here. You slip through bramble and shadow to the old oak. Acorns litter the damp leaf mold, some cracked, some whole. Your heart stutters. You gather, fast and careful, until the basket is a brown, hopeful weight. Acorns aren't new. Your grandmother made hunger bread from them once, boiled, soaked, ground to a bitter paste, then cut with rye. She said it gave her headaches but kept her walking. They're not top food. They have to be leached or they punish you. But you don't have days. You have hours. So you choose speed. You crush them on a board, scald the meal with boiling water, toast it on a flat pan till dark and almost nutty, bitterness humming underneath. You fold in a spoon of the last oat flour, your dragon hoard, until the dough turns thick and gritty. Your daughter watches, asks if this is what squirrels eat. The clever ones, you say. She grins, barely, and it aches sweeter than any feast. You pat the dough into thin cakes and set them by the coals. The smoke rises. The room smells like stubbornness. You flatten it into cakes and press them to the hot stone by the fire. They don't rise, of course not. There's nothing left in them to rise with, but they solidify, and that's what matters. You peel them off the stone when they are firm enough to hold together, and you break off a piece for your daughter. She nibbles it cautiously, chews, and then makes a face. It's weird, she says. You laugh, that means it's working. You eat slowly. It tastes like ash and dirt and something old. Not rotten, just ancient, like the forest itself is sharing some secret you weren't meant to know. It dries your mouth, but it puts something in your belly. That's enough. Later, you try roasting a few chestnuts you found among the leaves. They're wormy, but some of them are salvageable. You roast them on the same hot stone, cracking them open one by one. One is moldy, you toss it. Another is firm, slightly sweet, and you savor it like it's the last plum of summer. There's a strange elegance to these foods. Forest foods. The kinds of things the rich never touch unless the chefs touch them first. Acorns and chestnuts have fed animals for centuries, but now they're feeding you. Not well, not safely, but enough to stretch one more day. In some regions, especially across southern Europe, chestnuts were a staple for the poor during hard years. They grew in abundance and were easier to prepare than acorns. In Italy and France, some mountain villages even bake chestnut bread regularly. Sweet, dense, and nourishing. Scholars argue about whether those traditions spread northward or remained isolated. You don't care. You just know that if you find another worm-free nut tomorrow, you'll call it a miracle. But there's also risk. Not all nuts are friendly. You've heard stories of children poisoned by horse chestnuts, of families made sick from misidentified mushrooms and spoiled bark flour. One wrong bite and your suffering doesn't stretch. It ends quietly, maybe painfully, with no one left to tell your story. Still, you'll go back tomorrow. You know the trees now. You'll try leaching the acorns longer. See if the bitterness fades. You'll test roasting them in the coals, baking them into thinner cakes. Maybe mix them with chopped greens or bits of dried root. You're not a cook anymore. You're a kind of alchemist working with scraps, hoping for gold. Before sleep, your daughter holds up the last piece of her acorn cake and asks if you'll make more tomorrow. You nod. You tell her you'll find more nuts. She says, make it less weird next time. You laugh into your sleeve. That night you sit by the fire long after she falls asleep, turning a chestnut over and over in your hand like it's a jewel. The wind howls outside. Somewhere far away, wolves are crying. or maybe dogs, or maybe people. You press the chestnut into your palm and close your fingers around it. Tomorrow you'll go again. The morning fog hangs low and thick, curling around the roofs of the cottages like smoke from a dying fire. You can barely see a few feet ahead as you step out of the doorway, the door creaking on its leather hinge. The sky is a dull, featureless sheet of grey. No sun, no shadow, just an oppressive stillness that makes the world feel like it's been packed in wool. You can hear your daughter's breath behind you, faint and wheezy as she huddles in the blanket near the hearth. You left her the last piece of chestnut cake. You told her it was special. She believed you. Today you're thinking soup or something that could pretend to be soup if you squint hard enough and do not breathe through your nose. You gather a few pieces of dry wood, mostly twigs and splinters from the edge of the forest, and get the fire going. It takes longer now. The wood is damp, and you're clumsy from sleep and starvation. Still, the embers catch, and soon enough, you have a weak, sputtering flame. You fill the pot with water from the rain barrel. There's a thin sheen of algae floating on top, so you strain it through a bit of cloth. You're not picky anymore. As long as it doesn't move or smell like death, it's fair game. Into the pot goes a handful of dried dandelion leaves, a pinch of that old turnip you keep rehydrating over and over, and a bit of crushed acorn flour. It's thick, brown, and unappetizing, but it'll stretch the liquid into something more like food. What you're making is closer to GRL than soup, or maybe a pottage if you were being generous, is a dish that's existed for centuries. Boiled grains, roots, and vegetables all simmered into a single slop that you can sip or scoop. When made well, it can be comforting. When made like this, well, it's warm. That's about all it has going for it. In better years, your pottage might have included barley or oats, thick chunks of carrot, maybe bits of onion or cabbage, a scrap of meat if a chicken had died recently, even a few herbs for flavor. Parsley, sage, maybe a little garlic in a merciful year. Now it's just water and things pretending to be food. The only herb left is your tired twist of dried nettle, and even that's thinning. Your daughter stirs at the smell. Is it ready? Almost, you say, and it's true, though part of you wants to keep boiling it down into something smaller, denser, more precious. Hunger doesn't wait. You ladle 2 small bowls. She cups hers like treasure, blowing once before sipping. Her face doesn't change. Good sign, or she's too tired to complain. You eat slowly, watching firelight flicker under the pot. Bitter taste, texture halfway between mud and moss. But it's warm, and it stays down. New gold standard. If it doesn't make you sick, it's a success. There's a ritual to gruel. You hunch over the bowl as if it might flee. Sip, breathe. Feel heat spread through chest and belly, dulling hunger's blade. Not curing, never curing, just quieting, like snow swallowing footsteps. No talking, no thinking, just existing, bowl to mouth, breath to breath. Later you forage again, not for food so much as texture. A woody, stringy wild carrot, a root that might be parsnip or bravado. You dig it anyway. At the mill the wheel is still, no grain, no grinding. The miller's boy sits hollow-eyed on the porch, hands folded like he's forgotten their work. You nod, he nods. Silence does the rest. At the path's edge, a bird, frozen and whole, blackbird or starling hard to tell. You hesitate. Bad meat kills, but there's no smell, no rot. You wrap it in cloth, take it home, pluck it over the fire. Barely a thumb of flesh, but the broth shifts, thin as ever, suddenly richer. You boil the bones too, clouding the water with whatever life is left. Your daughter tastes it. It's meat, she says. It is, you answer. She doesn't ask which kind. Old superstition says thin soup lets a soul slip out on the steam. Another says the vapor carries prayers. You believe neither, but you like the idea that hunger might be noticed, by God, fate, or wind. Historically, pottage and gruel were the floor of peasant life. In good years they sustained, in bad they mocked. Scholars debate comfort versus humiliation. You don't. You call it necessary. Before bed you check the pot. A skin forms. It thickens as it cools. It might be breakfast, unless a hungrier hand finds your door. You wedge the stone against it and lie beside your daughter. Do we have to eat that again tomorrow? She asks. Only if we're lucky, you say. She laughs. Just enough. You close your eyes and pretend you're full. Morning doesn't announce itself, it just happens. Your joints are stiff from curling around a small body. She's breathing. Still here. That's more than you dared. The pottage has congealed to grey-brown paste. Still edible, technically. You scrape it into her bowl. No questions now, just eating and waiting. Today, your mind turns to liquid calories. Water isn't enough. You need something heavier than soup. There's only one thing left that fits: ale, or the memory of it. Not tavern joy. Survival. Liquid bread, boiled, means safer than water. Weak, sour, cloudy, but caloric. You go to old Marta's brewing pit at the village edge. Once her ale was thick and warm, jugs wrapped in cloth. Now it's battered barrels, a copper pot, damp straw. Steam reddens her face. You offer the last of your nettle and a twist of acorn meal. She eyes it, shrugs, dips you a jug. Drink it fast, she says. It won't keep. It goes down rough, sour bread left in rain. But there's a ghost of sweetness under the sour. Your daughter wrinkles her nose, drinks anyway. Some brew daily now, rinsing the same mash until all the life is washed out, stretching with mugwort or groundivi to fake flavour. Monks make stronger stuff, they say, but that's for the sick or the brave. You're moderately desperate and moderately proud. Back home you try your own ale. Not proper brewing, just cracked barley soaked warm by the fire, poured off like tea. Cloudy, warm, swallowable. She doesn't spit it out. A win. You whisper a small crooked prayer over the wrapped pot. Let this be more than water. Keep us one more day. Sleep brings bread. Hot, golden, tearing open in your hands. You have to talk about mould. What grain remains looks normal until it doesn't. A purple-black bloom on rye, the poor man's grain that loves cold, meagre soil and wet summers. Under the wrong sky, it carries a sickness. No one here says ergot, but everyone knows the bread that burns legs and pricks hands with pins. The girl in the next village tore her hair and swore angels spoke down the chimney. You didn't believe, not until you ate that grey-tinged heel your cousin pressed on you. It tasted wrong, and you were starving. 2 hours later, the trees breathed and your fingers didn't fit your hands. You cried for no reason while your daughter asked questions you couldn't hold. Now, when bread gleams dark where it shouldn't, you look away. Or you don't. Those are the choices famine leaves. Risk madness or keep the drumbeat hunger in your ribs. You wrap your shawl tighter and stir the pot. The day is waiting, and it does not care. Ergotism, they call it now. Historians debate whether it was common or rare. Some argue that outbreaks were isolated, local and unlucky. Others say it was a regular visitor in times like this, hiding in every granary too damp, every breadlow too dark. You don't need a scholar to tell you what it does. You've seen it firsthand. You felt it in your own bones. There are two types, apparently. The convulsive kind with fits and spasms, hallucinations and hysteria, and the gangrenous kind where your fingers turn black and fall off. You don't know which is worse. You just know that when the bread starts to smell sweet but wrong, like honey left out in the rain, you should throw it out. But no one does. No one can afford to. This morning, you find a small heel of rye bread near the hearth. It's from a trade you made 3 days ago, just a sliver wrapped in cloth. You were saving it. Now you unwrap it slowly, inspecting it under the grey light. It looks okay. There's no fuzz, no purple, no shine. But your stomach growls loud enough to make the floor creak. And suddenly you realize it doesn't matter. You break it in half, give the larger piece to your daughter, and chew the rest with your eyes closed. It tastes metallic. Or maybe that's just your imagination. You try to push the thought away. You push it open and find him curled up in a corner, eyes wide and unfocused. He's muttering something. Nonsense syllables that almost sound like a song. There's an untouched loaf on the floor beside him. Dark rye stray with purple. You leave it there. You sit by the fire and focus on your hands. She hums quietly some tune you don't recognize. You ask her how she feels. She says she's cold but not hungry. You make eye contact with a woman you've known for years, and neither of you speaks. There's no point. Words have become too heavy to carry. And hanging above it all is that quiet dread. You begin inspecting everything more closely. Acorns, grains, old loaves, and second-guessing every bite. Was that a bitter aftertaste, or just imagination? Was the dizziness from hunger or something darker? You remember an old rhyme, something the village children used to chant when skipping rope? Black bread, red hands, don't eat it if it stands. It never made much sense until now. That night, as you lie beside your daughter, you whisper stories to her. You talk about a loaf so big you had to carry it on your back, and a butter pat the size of your hand. She laughs just once, a dry giggle like wind through straw. You don't tell her the truth, that her fingers looked pale and blue this morning, or that you felt a tremor in your thigh that wouldn't stop for half an hour, and made bread from tree bark that tasted like honey. By the next morning you're craving something other than bread or what passes for bread these days. Your stomach has grown suspicious of loaves, of porridge, of anything grain-based. You've started imagining flavors that don't belong to anything you've eaten in months. It's not helpful, but it keeps your mind occupied when your body is too weak to move. You sit up slowly and feel the sway in your limbs. That half slice of possibly cursed rye bread still churns in your belly. Probably both. You need protein. Real protein. Something clean. Something not molded or gnawed on or scraped off a rock. Fish, it hits you all at once. Of course, the streams nearby, the pond beyond the trees, the river even further still. The Lord's men used to fish it and claim every trout's property. But in times like these, even those rules get blurry. You wrap your shawl around you, pick up your daughter's old wooden bucket, and head toward the pond. The mist clings low to the ground, curling around your ankles like smoke. You can't blame them either way. The pond is half frozen at the edges. The water's dark and still with a few reeds poking out like skeleton fingers. You crouch down and watch. Nothing moves. No ripples, no darting shapes, no signs of life. But there must be something. You break the ice with a rock and dip your hand into the water. But even in that brief moment, you think you felt something brush your fingers. Maybe a fish, maybe just hope. You don't have a line or bait or even a hook, but you do have an old basket and a bit of cloth. You fashion a crude trap just like the old woman taught you years ago, during a summer you barely remember. You weigh it down with stones, tie it to a stick and lower it into the shallow edge of the pond. Then you wait. Historically, fish were one of the great equalizers during a famine year. They were the protein of the poor when you could get them. In fact, many fast days, which happened often, sometimes over 100 a year, required fish instead of meat. That meant fish was already embedded in the food culture of the time. But when famine came, those fast rules turned into survival rules. And suddenly everyone wanted herring. In towns, salted fish became currency. In the countryside, it became legend. There are stories of peasants trading an entire winter's firewood for a single smoked deal. Children were sent to sleep with bits of fishbone under their pillows as charms. Some thought fish would appear if you sang the right song to the water. You try humming one now. Some tune your mother used to sing, more lullaby than charm. 2 hours pass. Your fingers are numb. Your knees ache. But when you pull the trap up, something glimmers inside. A fish, small, pale, terrified. You let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. It's barely longer than your hand, but it's meat. Real meat. You cradle it in both palms like a newborn. Head flips once, then stills. You build a fire near the bank, shielding it with stones to keep the wind out. You scale the fish with your fingernails, gut it with a sieve of sharpened bone, and slide it onto a thin green stick. You roast it slowly, turning it until the skin crisps. The smell alone makes your eyes water. Back at home, your daughter sits up the moment she hears the door creak open. She sees the fish and her face changes. She doesn't smile. No one smiles easily anymore, but her eyes brighten. That's all you need. You split the fish in half. She takes the head without complaint. You chew slowly, savoring every bite. The skin is smoky, a little oily. The flesh is soft and flakes apart. There's no salt, no herbs, nothing fancy. But it tastes real. Your stomach doesn't argue. It thanks you. That night you dream of rivers. Not just fish, but streams full of them, so full you could pluck them out with your bare hands. Your daughter dances along the banks, laughing. You follow, arms full of trout and eels and fat silver perch. In the dream, no one is hungry. The next day you return to the pond. The basket is empty this time. The next day too. But on the third, another fish, a little smaller but still enough. You learn to make broth from the bones. You save the skin and roast it crisp, turning it into a treat. You stretch each fish into 2 meals. It isn't enough, but it's something. You start wondering about the river. It's a long walk and the journey is dangerous. There are rumors of bands of starving men on the roads, desperate and wild. But the river runs deep and wide. If you could reach it, maybe you could catch something bigger or smoke what you find and trade it. Maybe even feed someone else. You begin to plan quietly, cautiously. You boil the fish bones again. You save the ashes of your fires. You wash the bucket. You clean your hands with melted snow. There's a strange energy in you now. Not hope, not yet, but something flickering under the skin. Fish do that. They remind you that not everything has rotted or vanished, that beneath the ice life still moves. Your daughter touches your sleeve as you pack your things for tomorrow. Will there be more fish? You smile, if we're lucky. She nods and curls up beside the fire. Tomorrow you'll walk farther. Try the stream past the abbey. Maybe even ask the monks for a scrap of net or a hook. Maybe they'll turn you away. Maybe not. But the fish is real and so are you. You don't want to talk about it. Not really, but there's no avoiding it forever, is there? The truth is, the longer the famine goes on, the more creative people get. And not in a charming, look at this clever recipe kind of way. No, is the kind of creativity that grows in the cracks of desperation, where logic gives out and instinct takes over. It's not cooking anymore. It's not even foraging. It's just surviving, no matter how low you have to go to do it. This morning you heard whispers, 2 women talking near the well. Low voices and quick glances. You know that tone. You've used it. It's how people talk about the unthinkable before they do it. One of them was holding something wrapped in cloth. You didn't ask. You didn't want to know what was inside. You've already seen it happen a few times. A loaf stretched with something that wasn't flour. Bread that doesn't rise, doesn't taste like anything, and burns into ash instead of crust. It looks like bread, smells like bread until you bite it. Bark. Straw, dirt. Some people are grinding up straw from thatch roofs, pounding it into powder, mixing it with water and acorn paste and calling it dough. Others have tried bark, inner bark peeled from trees, dried and scraped fine. If it's young and clean, you might just get away with it. But more often than not, it tastes like rot and sits in your stomach like a stone. You've heard of people adding clay. Not because it's nourishing, it isn't, but because it bulks the food, fools the mouth, tricks the belly for a little while. You even tried it once weeks ago with a small scoop of riverbank clay and some barley water. Tasted like wet coins and left your teeth gritty. But your daughter didn't vomit and you didn't faint that day, so you counted it as a win. Today you're making bread again. You can't call it bread, really. It's more like a paste you're shaping into discs and cooking on the hearthstone. You mash together crushed acorns, boiled sorrel, a few leftover nettle stems, and the last of the acorn flour that's gone slightly sour. The smell isn't great. It's damp and earthy with a hint of rot. You pretend it's cheese. You spread the dough thin, trying to trick it into crisping instead of steaming. The fire is too low to brown it, so you get a sort of damp cracker. Your daughter nibbles one edge, then pulls a face and puts it down. You don't blame her. You chew yours in sands. Later, you take a walk toward the mill. Not because there's grain you already know there isn't, but because sometimes people gather there to share whatever sad trick they've discovered to make food out of nothing. And today, someone's got a loaf they're cutting into slices thinner than paper. It's pale, dense, slightly green at the edges. You trade a scrap of boiled root for a piece. You taste it carefully. Sawdust, definitely sawdust. It's mixed with bean husks maybe, or ground peas, but the bulk of it is wood. You chew slowly, praying it doesn't splinter, praying it goes down and stays down. It does barely. No one says anything. No one makes eye contact. And there's an unspoken rule now. Don't ask what's in the food. If it's warm and it stays in your stomach, it's enough. Dignity is a luxury. Names are a luxury. Even recipes are gone. All that remains is the question, will this kill me? You remember a man last week who bragged about making bread from lichen and dried moss. He said he'd discovered a secret. 2 days later, he was foaming at the mouth, seized by tremors. Some mosses are edible. Some are absolutely not. He picked the wrong kind. Historians call this famine food. A bland term, almost clinical, but you know better. It's not food. It's fuel, just enough to keep the engine running until something better appears, or until you stop needing it. There's still debate among scholars about just how far people went during medieval famines. Some believe these desperate loaves were rare exceptions. Others argue they were the rule that for months or even years, entire communities lived off substitutes and poisons, chewing grass and scraping mold from rotten cheese. You tend to believe the second group. You're living it. Back home you try another batch. This time with some bark, you scrape from a birch tree near the edge of the woods. Birch is supposed to be safer, sweeter even if you get the inner layer. You boil it until soft, mash it with a rock and add it to the flour scraps you've been saving in a linen pouch. The dough comes together like glue, sticky and fibrous. You cook it flat and slow, the steam rising into your face as you lean over the fire. When it's done, you break it into pieces and hand half to your daughter. She hesitates, then takes a bite, then swallows. You wait. No vomiting, no tears. It's better than the fish skin, she says. You almost laugh. You eat your half slowly, chewing until your jaw aches. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just edible. That's the goal now. You keep a list in your mind. Edible, possibly edible, lethal. Every time you find something new, you test it like a potion. Taste, wait, survive. Repeat. That night you boil water with some nettle ash and bark scrapings and drink it like tea. It tastes like earth and tree sap, but it fills the silence between your ribs. Your daughter asks if tomorrow's bread will be made of actual things. You tell her, yes, you're lying. But lying is edible too in its own way. You dream of a bakery again, loaves lined up like sleeping children. But when you bite into one, it's filled with mud and hair. You wake before dawn, the fire is out again. You don't expect to feel envy anymore. Not this far into the famine. It's been scrubbed out of you, boiled away like everything else until all that's left is need. But today, when the steward rides through the village with 2 pack horses and a cart trailing behind him, the feelings return, sharp, hot, and bitter. The horses are fed. Their ribs don't show. One of them has a soft leather saddle with clean stitching. The steward himself is wearing a fur-lined cloak, dusted but dry. You haven't seen fur in months. More importantly, you smell something. Bread, real bread. Wheat, not barley. Leavened, crusted, aromatic. The kind of bread that actually has a shape to it. Round and heavy, not flat and cracking. There are only a few loaves, and they're not for you. He's bringing them to the manor house, tucked safely behind its tall wooden fence, where the nobility still eat daily and drink deeply. They're not untouched by the famine, no one is. But they have buffers, stores, access, wine instead of ditch water. Bread made from flour, not straw. You hear the steward speaking with the reeve, and though the wind carries most of the words away, a few phrases reach your ears. Collected tithe, barely enough. They still owe more. Then he nods toward the church and mutters something about charity, the kind that doesn't come without record-eeping. You stand there in the lane, clutching your daughter's hand, and watch them unload the cart. There's salted meat, too. Cheese, apples, slightly shriveled but whole. You swallow hard, then look away. You don't want your child to see your expression. Back at your cottage, you heat yesterday's leftover broth. It's thickened into a sort of glue overnight, and when warmed it takes on a texture somewhere between porridge and regret. Your daughter eats her portion in silence, scraping the bowl with a spoon made from hollowed horn. She asks if the people in the manor house ever get hungry. You shake your head. Not the same way, you say. Not like us. You remember the feast days ago when the Lord's table spilled over with food, roasted hares, stewed lamb, fish with sauce so rich it left your lips greasy for days. They'd throw scraps to the dogs and leave bones behind that still had meat on them. You used to think it was wasteful. Now you think it was cruelty in disguise. That afternoon, you see the difference even more clearly. 2 of the manor's servants pass by your door, carrying a basket between them, laughing as they walk. Inside you glimpse what looks like a half-finished pie. Meat pie, actual meat. They don't even notice you watching. And yet as the sun sets and the cold creeps back in, the steward surprises everyone. He returns to the village square with a single sack of barley and announces, as if reading from a script, that the Lord has seen your suffering and offers aid. It's not enough, not even close, but people still shuffle forward, hands open. You line up like the rest. When it's your turn, the steward eyes you, then your daughter, and tosses you a handful of grain loose right into your shawl. You thank him. He doesn't reply. He's already turned to the next poor soul. Back at home, you've run your fingers through the barley. It's clean, surprisingly so. You wonder if it was meant for horses. You grind a bit of it by hand, using your flat stone and the edge of a roof tile. It's slow, tedious work. Your palms go raw. But when you finally cook it into a GRL, it's decent. Not good, not filling, but familiar. It tastes like years ago, like something you used to eat without thinking. Your daughter calls it almost real food. You both smile. Later, you hear rumors from the far end of the village. Someone's stolen bread from the manor kitchens. They say a boy snuck in, took 2 small loaves and was caught hiding in the hay barn. The steward came back after dark, flanked by 2 men with clubs. There's no punishment yet, just threats. But everyone knows how these things go. Bread becomes evidence. Hunger becomes a crime. The divide between you and the manor house grows sharper every day. You live off roots and bark and dreams. They live off storehouses and cellars and someone else's labor. It's always been that way, of course, but famine makes the lines bold. There's an old debate among scholars about just how generous the nobility were during famine years. Some records show charity, bread baked in monastery ovens, grain redistributed, alms given freely. But others suggest that the rich hoarded what they could, locking granaries and guarding orchards with armed men. You don't need a historian to tell you how it is. You can see it from your doorway. What's strange is that some of the manor folk don't look much better than you. Now the servants are thinner. One of the maids came to the edge of the village last week and traded a silver brooch for a boiled fish. You watched it happen. She didn't even pretend it wasn't for her. Still they have bread. You don't. Before sleep, you take a piece of the barley paste and press it into a flat cake. You dry it by the fire slowly, turning it every few minutes. You're saving it for tomorrow, not because it will be better later, but because having it there gives you something to look forward to. Your daughter asks what the people in the manor dream about. Probably not food, you say. She thinks for a second. That sounds boring. You agree. That night, you dream of walking into the manor kitchen. You're dressed as a noble woman. Everyone bows. You lift the lid off a silver tray and find straw bark acorns, the same food you always eat. You laugh and they all clap like it's the finest meal they've ever seen. You wake up smiling. Then you remember and the smile fades. The fire is still going for once. Winter doesn't arrive with a grand entrance. It seeps in slow and mean like a draft under the door that turns into a blizzard by morning. And this year it doesn't arrive on schedule. The seasons used to have some rhythm to them. You could feel the year turning in your bones. You used to mark the days by tasks, planting, weeding, harvesting, resting. But now the rhythm is gone. Time slips sideways. The days blend into each other like garel too thin to hold its shape. No harvest came this year, and without it winter isn't a change. It's just more of the same, only colder. You wake up to frost on the inside of the walls. The fire died sometime in the night, and your breath fogs in front of your face as you sit up. Your daughter is curled beside you, wrapped in your only blanket, her hands tucked under her armpits. Her lips are tinged blue again. You tuck the blanket tighter around her and rise, joints cracking like old hinges. Outside, the village looks half dead. No snow yet, but the ground is hard as stone and the sky is flat and colorless. There's no movement, no carts, no smoke from chimneys, no birdsong. Even the rats have grown thin. You haven't seen one in a week, and that's concerning. The rhythm of the year used to anchor you. In spring you dug and planted. In summer you weeded, tended, hoped. In autumn you gathered, stored, counted. In winter you rested, or at least tried to. There were repairs to make, tools to fix, bread to bake. But now with the harvest gone and no grain stored, winter doesn't feel like rest. It feels like an extension of a punishment you don't remember earning. You try to light the fire. The kindling is damp. The peat is crumbly and weak. You blow until your lungs hurt, and eventually the coals catch. The flames are small and angry, but they're alive. You warm your hands and then hers. She stirs, eyes flicking open, and mumbles something about breakfast. You hand her a sliver of dried bark cake and pretend it's enough. You step outside again to gather what little you can. The frost has killed most of the wild greens. Sorrel has wilted into mush. Nettles are dry and brittle, and even the weeds seem to have given up. You find one half-frozen root and dig it out with your fingers. Hands going numb. You can't tell if it's a carrot or a parsnip. Doesn't matter. It's food. You know the hunger is changing you. You move more slowly. Your thoughts come in fragments. Sometimes you walk into a room and forget why. You say the wrong words. You stare too long at nothing. Your daughter told you yesterday that your voice sounded strange. You didn't notice. You boil the root with a bit of yesterday's GRL, and a pinch of old salt that you'd forgotten you had. It tastes like the inside of a wooden spoon, but it's warm and your daughter eats without complaint. You wonder how she's still so quiet. She used to hum while she chewed. Used to tell you stories about imaginary beasts and glowing rivers. Now she just swallows and watches the fire. Later you walk to the church, hoping they're handing out charity bread again. The line is long, too long. By the time you reach the front, the last of the loaves are gone. The monk at the door shrugs and says, "God will provide, you want to slap him." Instead, you nod and walk away. Some of the villagers talk about fleeing, heading south toward the coast or inland toward the forests. But there's nowhere left to run. Famine isn't local anymore. It's everywhere. And the road is worse than staying put. There are travelers, bands of hungry men who have nothing left to lose. You've heard of entire families disappearing. You've seen the fear in people's eyes when someone knocks on a door too late at night. So you stay, you wait, you endure. The old seasonal rhythms are broken now. And with them, something in your spirit has cracked too. In past winters, even the hard ones, there was structure. You could say only until Candlemas, or we'll be planting again soon. But now there's no promise of spring. There's no seed, no certainty. The tools lie untouched in the shed, their wooden handles warped from disuse. You haven't sharpened the sickle in months. Why would you? You remember when the church used to ring the bells to mark the seasons? Ascension, Maclan, Advent. You haven't heard the bells in weeks. Maybe they're saving the metal for something else. Maybe there's no one left strong enough to pull the rope. There's an old debate among scholars about how deeply these seasonal patterns structured peasant life. Some claim the cycle of planting and harvest was a kind of spiritual metronome, a way to find peace even in suffering. Others argue that hunger could break that rhythm completely, reducing people to day-to-day survival with no sense of the larger wheel of the year. Standing here in a frozen field with no crops and no calendar, you know where you fall in that argument. Your days have no names now, just cold mornings and colder nights. Just the question, what can I eat today? Your daughter begins coughing again in the evening, dry, shallow. She doesn't have the strength to make it loud. You rub her back, warm her hands, and feed her a few sips of broth. You tell her a story about the winter birds, how they carry messages between sleeping trees. She listens barely, she listens. That night you try to remember what month it is. November, December birth. You don't know. You remember that your birthday was sometime around now. You don't mention it. What would be the point? You lie awake long after your daughter falls asleep, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind. It doesn't howl anymore, it groans. You think about the tools in the shed still waiting. You think about the frozen field. You think about a spring that may never come. The fire dims. You don't add more fuel. You just pull your daughter closer and close your eyes. You dream of planting. You dig into the soil with your bare hands, but instead of seeds you find bones. The sky breaks open for a few hours, and though it doesn't exactly qualify as sun, it's lighter than usual. Pale grey, shifting toward a sort of milky silver. It feels strange standing outside in it. Your eyes squint, like they've forgotten how to process brightness. The cold's still there, of course, but not biting, just lingering. A dull ache instead of a blade. You take it as a sign, maybe not of hope, let's not get ridiculous, but of opportunity. You wrap a tattered scarf around your daughter's neck and pull the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Then you head out, bucket in hand, toward the hedgerows on the outskirts of the village. It's risky. Yes, a wasted trip could cost you precious strength, but you've heard rumors. Someone saw berries. Probably not enough to fill a hand, but anything that grows uninvited this late in the year is worth the gamble. The ground is stiff but not yet frozen, solid, and your boots crunch against the brittle grass as you move. The hedgerow looms up ahead, knilled, twisted branches, dry leaves still clinging like stubborn ghosts. In the warmer months, this place bursts with green life. Blackberries, gooseberries, wild strawberries, even the occasional hazelnut. You remember dragging your daughter out here on a summer afternoon years ago. Her face smeared with juice, her laughter floating over the grass. Now the branches are stripped, the underbrush brittle. Still, you kneel down and begin the search. Carefully, slowly, and there, after 20 minutes of clawing through thorns and stinging your hands on nettles you thought were dead, you find them. A cluster of shriveled rose hips, dark red and dusty, but clinging stubbornly to the stalks. You pull them gently, one by one, and drop them into your pocket. Nearby you spot a handful of hawthorn berries, wrinkled and half frozen but intact. Then a small miracle. A patch of slowberries. Hard and bitter, but they're there. You pick what you can. Fingers going numb as you pull at stems and twist berries free. Some are half rotten. You leave those behind. Others are almost sweet when you press them to your tongue. Tart like the memory of better fruit. It's barely a handful, all told, but it's enough to call it a good day. You head home slowly, one eye on the tree. No one is out here now, not this far from the cottages, safer than it was weeks ago. Most of the traveling desperate have moved on or died. But the fear never really leaves. You keep your knife ready in your belt just in case. Back at home, your daughter is asleep by the fire. You stroke her hair, then set to work. First, you wash the berries, stripping away bits of leaf and twig. Then you boil them softly, gently, with just enough water to cover. They split open, releasing their sharp scent into the air. It smells like autumn, like life. You mash the boiled berries through a scrap of cloth, straining out seeds and skins. What's left is a thin paste, reddish and murky, but rich in that way. Only famine food can be real, fresh, growing from the ground, rich. You stir in a bit of acorn flour to thicken it. Then shape the mixture into little cakes and lay them by the fire to dry. When they're firm enough to hold, you give one to your daughter. She bites it carefully. Her eyes widen. "It's sweet," she whispers. You nod a little. "It's real," she adds. And she's right, it is. Wild berries are the last gift of the old year. A kind of closing note. Usually gone by now, but this year the cold came late and the famine came early. And the two overlap just enough to leave a few scraps behind. You thank the hedge in your mind. You picture them waiting through the long months, roots deep, holding secrets under the frost. There's debate among historians about just how much wild fruit peasants relied on. Some records barely mention berries at all. Others describe children sent into the fields with baskets to forage for every last bit of vitamin C before winter turned their teeth to powder. Scurvy isn't just for sailors, after all. A season without fruit is fine. 2 or 3, that's when people start bleeding from the gums and losing teeth with every bite. You think of that now, chewing your tart little cake, imagining your cells cheering as the juice slides down your throat. You don't know what vitamins are, but you know when your body says thank you. This is one of those moments. The rest of the berry mash you mix with a little boiled grain and mold into a sort of pudding. It's sticky and strange and barely holds together, but it looks like something festive. Your daughter insists on saving it for a special day. You don't argue. She wants to pretend it's a treat. So, let it be one. That night the wind picks up. A storm rolls in. Not snow, not yet, but the kind of slicing rain that freezes halfway down. You patch the holes in the walls with straw and hang an old cloth across the door. The fire struggles to stay lit. The warmth from the berries lingers, though like a memory. Your daughter sleeps beside you, one hand still clinging to the cloth-wrapped berry cake she didn't finish. You press your hand against her back. She's breathing steady. You wonder if the trees know, if they feel the way you do, hollow, waiting, listening for something that may never come again. Spring is far off, too far to picture. But today, for a few bright moments, the hedgerow remembered you, gave you something living. You dream of a summer field full of berries so ripe they fall into your hand. No thorns, no hunger, just sweetness, woohoo! You wake up to wind and the storm and the fire still going. You wake with the wind still banging at the shutters and the thatch above your head creaking with every gust. One of the roof beams has started leaking again. Slow drips plop into a wooden bowl near the hearth. The storm didn't break in the night like you'd hoped. If anything, it's worse now, louder, hungrier. It's the kind of wind that sounds like it's trying to find a way inside your bones. You stay under the blanket a few minutes longer, wrapped around your daughter, like you can block out the world by sheer will. But your stomach has other plans. It growls long and low like it's trying to remind you that berry cakes only go so far. You feel lightheaded when you sit up. Pit of vertigo spins the room for a second, but you blink hard and push through it. No time to be dizzy. There's work to do. There's always work, even when there's no energy left to do it. Today, you're going underground. Roots and tubers, nature's buried secrets. That's what the old ones always said. When nothing else grows, the earth still hides food in its depths. Parsnips, carrots, turnips, even wild onions if you're lucky. They're not pretty, not the prize crops of feasts and festivals, but they keep people alive when the fields have nothing left to say. You gather your digging stick and wrap your scarf tight against your face. The wind slices down the path as you walk, cold and sharp like broken glass. No one else is out. Not in this weather, just you and the grey. You head toward the edge of the woods where the soil is softer, and the wild things sometimes grow unnoticed. The digging is slow and hard, and the ground's half frozen and packed with roots so tangled they fight you back. You chip away at the surface with your stick. Fingers stiff and clumsy, knees soaked from kneeling in the mud. It's miserable work, and that's before your back starts to spasm. But after an hour you find it, a turnip, small, cracked, a little worm-eaten but intact. It comes loose with a wet squelch, and you hold it up like a treasure. You keep going. Another hour, another find. A wild carrot so thin that it's barely more than a root, but it smells like something real. Then a knot of bokroot, thick and hairy. You'll have to scrub it forever to make it edible. But it's heavy in your hand. That alone makes it precious. You think about the stories your mother told you of famine years long ago, where people survived entire winters on what they could dig from the earth. Not the fields, the woods, the ditches, the forgotten corners. One woman, she said, once fed her whole family on wild parsnips and cattail roots, boiling them into thick pastes and calling it marrow stew. You never knew if that story was real, but it feels real now. Historically, root vegetables were the peasants' pantry, reliable, storable, and spectacular. In good years, they filled the gaps between meats and grains. In bad years, they were the main event. You remember a feast day long ago where someone made roasted turnips with honey and herbs. You thought it was fancy. Now you'd kill for a plain boiled one. There's some disagreement among scholars about which wild roots were actually used by peasants during famines. Some records mention parsnips and leeks. Others point to lesser-known plants like hogweed root or Alexander's. A few theories even suggest that underground parts of common weeds were boiled and eaten, though those would have been risky. Some roots nourish, some kill. The line is thin. You've rolled the dice more than once. Back home, your fingers are too numb to untie the scarf, so you just yank it off. Your daughter rushes to the door when she sees the bundle in your arms. "Is that a carrot?" she asks, eyes wide. "Sort of," you say, as I call it one. You scrub the roots clean in a bowl of cold water. The bok takes the longest, caked with a mud and full of tiny stones. You peel it with a bit of shell and slice it into thin rounds. Everything goes into the pot, even the bits you'd normally toss. There's no room for waste now. You add a little ash for flavor and a chunk of old bark bread to thicken it. It's a strange recipe, one only a famine could invent. The stew simmers slowly, filling the room with an earthy, sour scent. It's not good. Not really, but it smells like food, and that's become a rare pleasure. Your daughter stirs the pot while you clean your hands. You can't feel your fingertips, but you don't say anything. No need to worry her. When the stew is done, you share it between two bowls. You eat sitting close to the fire, holding the bowls in your palms like they might float away. The turnip is bitter, the bok's tough. The carrot sliver is the best part, still vaguely sweet with just a hint of that old familiar flavor. You chew slowly, eyes closed, pretending it's a whole plate of roast vegetables seasoned with the oil and herbs. Your daughter licks her bowl clean. "Will there be more tomorrow?" she asks. "If I can dig it," you say. "Hoy." She nods like that's the most natural thing in the world. That night, after she's asleep, you sit by the fire with the last chunk of parsnip in your hand. You're tempted to save it, bury it again, maybe try to plant it come spring if spring comes. But your stomach growls and the cold presses in, and you know how foolish that hope is. You eat it raw, chewing slowly, savoring the sting of bitterness on your tongue. You dream of fields full of roots, easy to pull, clean and sweet. You don't even need a digging stick. You just reach down and lift them free. You wake with your hands still aching. The sky is ash, flat, lid tight, unmoving. Even the crows are silent. That's never good. Outside, the cold doesn't slap. It settles. Damp wool over your shoulders, heavy and sure. You look toward the Lord's fields. They're too clean. Not nature, months of combing. Dozens of villagers crawling row by row for what the reapers missed. A grain here, a husk there, sometimes a worm. You've done it until your nails bled. Gleaning is your right, one of the last. But this year the scraps were fought over like treasure and tasted like dirt. You're not after grain now. That ship sank with autumn. Maybe a forgotten root, a few dried peas, a carrot top if luck blinks. Unlikely is still better than nothing. You walk the margins, eyes down, hands wrapped in rags so they'll still bend. Frost crunches. Stones flip, nothing. A thistle goes into your bag because everything does now. At the far edge, an old woman, thin as a broom handle beneath 3 cloaks, nods without words. No one wastes them. You nod back and keep to the hedge, where you find it. One brittle pea pod clinging to a dead vine. Inside, 3 wrinkled peas, hard as pebbles, perfect. You don't eat them. You don't even let yourself imagine it. Seed is holy. They disappear into the cloth lining your pouch. A few yards later, half a rotted beet frozen into mud. You pry it loose, peel the black from it, smile anyway. Boiled long enough, it'll be food. Home, your haul laid out like trophies. The beet, the thistle, a handful of tough leaves, plus the peas you don't mention. Your daughter doesn't ask. You boil the beet for hours. It barely softens, but the water blushes dark pink and somehow color feels like calories. She says it tastes like old pennies and eats every bite. You think about seed again. You remember spring. Hands strong, mind full of plans, pressing peas into warm soil and patting it down like a lullaby. Maybe there'll be another spring. Maybe these 3 will be it if no one eats them first. At dusk, you sneak behind the house and bury a tiny clay pot with the peas wrapped in cloth. It feels like hiding treasure, or a promise. Your daughter in the doorway. Are we eating tomorrow? Yes, you say. She doesn't ask with what. Night rattles the chimney. You sleep under the same thin blanket and wake with your fists clenched from a dream of heavy baskets and gold fields. The next dawn arrives as a smell. Smoke, yes, but richer, fatty, sharp. Villagers step from their doors, noses lifted like hounds. The trail leads past the old coopers, toward the baker's ruined hut, empty for years, now breathing smoke from its cracked chimney. Inside, Marta bent at a fire, turning something small on a spit. Fat drips into a pan. You can't tell what creature it was. She sees you, eyes flicker, looks away. No one invites anyone in anymore. By noon, the smell is gone. Whispers bloom, rat, pigeon, hedgehog with thistle and salt, as if anyone has salt. Real food, when it appears, breeds suspicion. Where did you get it? What did it cost? Preservation used to be ritual, autumn pride. Smoke the meat, salt the fish, pickle the roots. Now it's desperation's craft. You've dried things you once wouldn't name, smoked things you hoped were safe. Salt is relic rare. You remember a lump passed between 3 families for a sniff, traded for a half loaf of acorn bread. Your mouth watered so hard it hurt. Today you try preserving what you do have, mushrooms. You found them firm and dry beneath a fallen log, and only dared claim them after a careful sniff, a look at gills and a nod from the old forager. Sliced thin, threaded on twine, they hang over the hearth to dry. They may crisp to nothing or fuzz with mold, but if they keep, they'll be worth their weight in lard next week. People far from here argue whether peasants knew how to preserve in famine years. You don't argue. You've watched Marta salt a fish until Pentecost. Kids string apples like garlands. Widows bury roots in ash-lined pits to dodge the frost. The problem isn't skill, it's material. You can't smoke thin air. You can't dry a promise. Still, your hands keep working. A pinch of scraped salt over the slices, a miracle at the bottom of a jar, a careful low fire. Your daughter asks, tomorrow? Later, you say, when we really need them. She nods, learning the rhythm. Eat today, save for worse, expect worse. You build a little cold smoke box from scrap and hang the last wizened turnip inside. It smells like old shoes and hay, but it doesn't rot. You'll take it. Preserved food feels like stolen time, something you can reach into later and say, we made it this far. But it lies too. Spoiled eel and bad cheese have killed faster than winter. You've watched it. The funerals are short because no one has the strength to stand. At night you flip the mushroom slices and feel, finally, like you're doing something that isn't just reacting to misery. You tell your daughter a story about a girl who knew the names of roots and herbs, who banished hunger and called deer down from trees. What did she eat? Dried mushrooms, smoked fish, bread soaked in honey. Is that real? It was once. She believes you. For a heartbeat, you do too. The market is a ghost. Where noise used to live, only slow feet and thin voices scrape the frost. Stalls lean like broken teeth. A cracked pot here. A withered root there under a threadbare cloth, and a stare that warns you not to ask the price. You carry trade that barely counts. Dried mushrooms, a ribbon of ash-preserved beet, rabbit fur scraps that are more fluff than pelt. In famine, fluff can be currency. You circle. A man sells waterlogged oats by the handful from a bucket. Another claims dried plum that looks like bark kissed with vinegar. You don't ask questions. Truth is stretched so thin you can see daylight through it. A girl 12 at most unwraps a small brick of flour. You don't ask what it's made of. Barley if you're lucky, acorn if you're not, bone if you're cursed. Too pale, almost grey. You trade your mushrooms. She nods. You walk away palming the flour like a flame. It won't make bread. Maybe dumplings, maybe a thickened soup. Still something. Familiar faces look hollowed. The cheese woman is toothless now. The loud market man sits behind an empty stall as if he's forgotten how to sell. Even the steward's guards look ragged, mud to the knees, knuckles cracked and bleeding. Hunger drags everyone toward the same ghost. A shout. A knot of people surges. A man holds a loaf, dark, dense, bound in twine. Real grain, he says, rye, maybe wheat. Desperation moves faster than dignity. Coins fly. A pair of shoes. It's fake. Someone shouts, but hands are already tearing it apart, passing chunks like prayer. You don't move. You've seen this play. Bread riots that end not in blood but in disappointment. Sawdust bark meal. The cellar gone. The crowd left with crumbs and fury. By the time the square exhales, it's over. The loaf was mostly lie. Everyone knew. Everyone tried anyway. You understand? Yesterday you'd have tried too. Scholars can argue whether markets thinned or collapsed. From where you stand, they frayed into quiet bargains and necessary lies. You tuck the grey flour deeper into your pouch, feel its small weight and start home through the ash-coloured morning. Empty stalls, no grain, nothing but the trade by word and whisper. You're living through the latter. It's not a market anymore. It's a stage. And the only play left is desperation. As you turn to leave, you notice a small group gathered near the church steps. They are not selling. They're praying. Not loudly, just kneeling, eyes closed, hands open to the sky. You recognize one of them, Thomas, the baker's apprentice. He used to whistle while loading loaves into the oven. Now he looks like he hasn't eaten in days. You nod at him. He doesn't see you. Back home, your daughter waits near the fire. She perks up when she sees the flour. You mix it into a paste with water and a pinch of dried herb. It smells faintly like mint or mold. You boil it until it thickens into something that pretends to be porridge. She eats her portion in 2 bites. You take yours slower, stretching it out, letting the warm go all the way down. That night, she asks why you go to the market when there's nothing to buy. You tell her times you go just to remember you're not the only one. She's quiet after that. You lie awake long after she's asleep, thinking about the bread riot, about the man holding that loaf like it was a holy relic, about the girl who traded you flour, about the monk on the church steps who said, God will provide, and gave out nothing. You dream of a real market, baskets overflowing with eggs, fruit piled high, cheese wheels cut open like treasure chests. You're walking through it, but no one sees you. You try to speak, but you have no mouth. You wake to silence. The kind of silence that's not peace, but the absence of anything else. You stir the fire back to life, feed it a few precious sticks. You look at the flour pouch again. It's empty. Tomorrow maybe the market will be better. Or maybe it won't. You'll go anyway. The church bell rings at dawn. One slow, dragging note that echoes through the frozen streets like a warning. It's not Sunday. It's not a funeral. This time it means something else. Arms. You sit up immediately, brushing sleep from your face and feeling every ache along your spine. Your daughter stirs beside you, her small body cold to the touch. She hears the bell too and doesn't ask questions, just starts getting dressed, movement sluggish but steady. You both know the drill by now. Outside, the village is already gathering. Word must have spread last night. The steward has allowed the abbey to open its kitchens this morning, likely under pressure from the Lord, or maybe out of some lingering guilt passed off as mercy. It doesn't matter. Charity is charity, no matter how bitter the aftertaste. When you arrive at the gates of the churchyard, there are dozens ahead of you, all wrapped in shawls and rags, each clutching an empty bowl like a relic. You fall into line silently. The air smells of smoke and boiled broth. That alone is enough to make your mouth water. It's been 3 days since either of you had anything more than bark-thickened gyar. The idea of something warm, something made in a real kitchen, is enough to draw people from their beds, despite the frost on the ground and the heavy clouds rolling low across the sky. The monks move slowly, ladling thin soup into each bowl, murmuring blessings that sound half-hearted at best. The broth is pale, barely more than hot water, dotted with what looks like oats and floating scraps of leaf. Cabbage, maybe, or beet tops. A few lucky ones get a small hunk of coarse bread, hard as stone, but soaked soft in the soup. It's not much, but in this world it's something close to a feast. When your turn comes, you bow your head out of habit, though the monk doesn't meet your eye. He fills your bowl without a word. You step aside quickly so the next person can move up. Then you crouch with your daughter in the corner of the yard, under the crumbling statue of some forgotten saint. The stone's face is weathered smooth, but the folds of the robe remain. Your daughter eats fast, head bent low, both hands around the bowl. You do the same. The soup is thin. It tastes like smoke and a memory of onion, but it's hot and it stays down, and for a few minutes your body believes in warmth again. The bread, if you can call it that, has the texture of boiled bark and the flavor of sawdust, but it softens in the soup, and you chew every bite until your jaw aches. You glance around the yard. No one speaks. Everyone eats like they're afraid the food might vanish if they look up. A young boy in the far corner licks his bowl clean, then clutches it to his chest like he might use it again, just in case. An old man drops to his knees while eating, maybe out of piety, maybe out of sheer exhaustion. No one moves to help him. There's nothing left to spare. Charity during famine is a strange thing. It's not kindness, it's rationed pity. The monks don't serve with compassion. They serve with discipline. There's no eye contact, no extra ladle, no warmth in their voices. They do what the Lord expects. No more, no less. Historically, monastic kitchens played a significant role in feeding the poor during times of famine, especially in places where the local lord refused to distribute grain. Some were generous, offering alms, bread, even medical care. Others gave just enough to stave off public disorder. Most walked the line between divine obligation and practical self-preservation. You're never sure which side your local abbey falls on. There's an ongoing debate among scholars about whether medieval charity was a system of salvation or a tool of control. Did the church give because it believed in mercy, or because hungry peasants were more likely to riot? You have your own opinion. You've seen the look in the monk's eyes. This isn't about love. This is about keeping the peace. After the meal, you return your bowl to the stack by the church wall. A nun gestures toward a crate of small loaves. They're passing them out to families with children. You step forward, and after a pause, she hands you one. It's warm, still warm. Your daughter's eyes go wide. You tuck it under your arm and head home fast before someone changes their mind. Back at the cottage, you set the loaf on the table like a jewel. You don't cut it. You tear it with your hands. Inside, the crumb is dense and a little sour, but there are flecks of real grain in it. You eat half and save the rest for evening. It's the best thing you've tasted in weeks. Later that day, you return to the church, not for more food but for news. The monks sometimes post notices about grain deliveries or medicinal supplies. Today there's nothing new, just the same tired prayers written on wax tablets. But you overhear two of the brothers discussing the upcoming feast of St. Bridge. They say the kitchen may open again. Then you mark the day in your mind, carving it into your thoughts like a tally. You think about the old stories. Saints feeding hundreds with one loaf, monks multiplying fish, God turning water into wine. You've stopped believing in miracles, but you haven't stopped hoping for soup. Before bed, your daughter asks if you can go back to the abbey tomorrow. You shake your head. Not until the bell rings again, you say. We wait. She's quiet, then whispers, we'll hear it again soon. You want to believe that that night you tuck the remaining piece of bread into a cloth and hide it beneath your blanket, just in case rats or neighbors come sniffing. It's hard as a rock by morning, but still edible, still precious. You dream of long wooden tables, of candles flickering against stone walls, of monks passing loaves down the line laughing. In the dream, your bowl is always full. You wake up hungry, of course, but you still have bread. The loaf from the abbey is gone by mid-morning. Not that it was large to begin with, and certainly not enough to make it through the day, but it went down warm, shared between you and your daughter in silence. Both of you chewing each bite, as if your teeth might never get another chance. Now your belly is only slightly less hollow, but it's tricked for a few hours at least into feeling like it might not consume itself today. That's what food is now. Not fuel, not pleasure, just a brief distraction from the gnawing. Still, you're uneasy. Something's not right. It started with the bread, not the loaf from the monks. That was dense and sour, sure, but it came from a kitchen that still resembles a kitchen. You mean the last loaf you made yourself? The one stretched with root scrapings and a bit of stale barley flour. You remember biting into it, and feeling a sting not on your tongue but in your gut. Wrongness that started small and got louder. You chewed slower, watched your daughter more closely. She seemed fine, but you couldn't stop thinking about it. By the afternoon, the ache in your stomach has grown sharper. Not just hunger anymore. This is something else. Cramping. A twisting pain that doubles you over when you stand too fast. Your daughter asks if you're all right, and you lie. Of course you do. That's what parents do in a famine. Pretend. You sit by the hearth rubbing your side and thinking through every ingredient. Nothing new, nothing poisonous. You're sure of it. But then again, you're not really sure of anything anymore. When your ingredients list includes moss, bark, roots you can't name, and flour that may or may not have been gnawed on by something with too many legs, certainty is a luxury. You remember a story from early in the famine about a man who tried to make stew from dried dock roots and mushrooms. They weren't even the poisonous kind, supposedly, but they hadn't been cleaned properly. Bits of rot left behind, or a few moldy scraps tossed in without thinking. The whole family got sick, not violently, just steadily worse. Diarrhea, weakness, hallucinations, then stance. There's a fringe belief you've heard whispered since childhood, that certain famine foods carry not just risk of illness, but a kind of curse, a spiritual sickness. That eating what should not be eaten, moldy bread, scavenged rot, food meant for animals, can twist the soul as much as the stomach. Superstition, of course. But when you're curled on the floor, cramping and shaking, it's hard not to believe in invisible punishments. You manage to drink a bit of warm water, and that helps a little, enough to sit upright again at least. Your daughter is quiet, playing with a smooth stone she's kept since summer, tracing patterns in the soot beside the hearth. You watch her hands move and try to keep your mind from spiraling. When the light starts to fade, you force yourself to prepare something for the evening meal. There's not much left, just a thin strip of beet, a few leaves of something vaguely green, and some of the questionable flour you traded for at the market. You boil it all into a paste and call it soup. But when it's done, the smell turns your stomach. Your daughter eats anyway without comment. That alone is terrifying. She's never refused food before, not even the worst bark bread. You ask her if it tastes off. She shrugs, says no, but you know she's lying too. Now that makes two of you. You try a spoonful. The taste is metallic. Not sharp, not acidic, just wrong, flat and bitter, like wet stone and old leaves. You force it down and take another, then stop. You scrape the rest into the fire when your daughter's not looking. Later, your body rebels again. Not violently, no fever, no vomiting, but a creeping illness in your bones. Like your blood has gone sluggish. You lie down early and wrap yourself tight in the blanket, shivering though the room isn't cold. Your daughter lies beside you, her hand resting gently on your arm. "Will you be better tomorrow?" she asks. You tell her yes. You have no idea. There's an open question among historians, one they love to argue about, concerning the real cost of famine foods. Not just the deaths from outright starvation, but the slow deaths, the lingering ones. What happens to a body fed on rot and ash and false bread? Some scholars believe these years left scars that never healed. Gut diseases, organ failure, long-term weakness passed down to children born after the famine had ended. Others argue that the peasant body adapted, somehow learned to digest poison just enough to keep breathing. You wonder which theory you're proving right now? By candlelight, you examine the flour you brought home from the market again. It smells fine, musty, but not foul. You stir it with a bit of water and wait. Within minutes, bubbles rise oddly fast. Too fast, fermentation, spoilage. You can't tell anymore. All you know is your belly still hurts, and your daughter's eyes look sunken. In the morning, you plan to go to Marta. She has knowledge of roots and herbs passed down through God knows how many grandmothers. Maybe she'll have something to soothe the pain. Maybe she'll ask for more than you can pay. You'll go anyway. For now, you lie still and breathe through the cramps. You count the spaces between them. You try not to think about what you've eaten in the last week. You try not to remember the old warnings. If it smells too sweet, it's not safe. If it tastes too bitter, it's already spoiled. You whisper a prayer to no one in particular, pressing your lips against your daughter's hair. Your stomach growls again. Not hunger this time. Something else. You close your eyes and listen to the fire crackle like a mouth chewing dry leaves. You've done a lot of unthinkable things since the famine began. Things you never imagined yourself doing. Not in dreams, not in nightmares. Eating bark, digging up rotten vegetables from frozen earth, bargaining with priests, stealing a turnip from an abandoned shed, and lying about it when someone asked. But the hardest part, the thing that still doesn't sit right in your chest even now, is choosing who eats first. You wake up weak, throat dry, limbs sore. Your stomach hasn't stopped aching, though the sharpness from yesterday has dulled into something low and constant, like a bell that never quite stops ringing. Your daughter sleeps next to you, curled like a comma, her breath shallow and steady. You watch her ribs rise and fall, and you wonder quietly, without letting the thought take full shape, how much longer she can last like this. The hunger is cruel with children. They fade differently. Adults buckle under it, collapse. But children stretch out the fall. They lose their appetite first, then their curiosity. Their laughter fades into silence. Eventually their eyes stop moving. You've seen it happen. The baker's youngest, the stable boy, even the steward's own niece, though no one says it out loud. You sit up and try to move without waking her. Your legs shake when they touch the floor. Your arms feel like they belong to someone else, someone older, more brittle. You make your way to the hearth and rekindle the coals with a bit of dry moss and twigs. The flame flickers to life with some effort, and you warm your hands while planning the day's meal, or what passes for it. There's barely anything left. A handful of dried greens. A bit of root you found yesterday, questionable but not immediately lethal, and half of a cake of bark bread that could crack a tooth if you're not careful. You boil water and steep the greens. You shave the root into thin slices. You chew the bread slowly to soften it before adding it to the pot. The resulting stew is as watery as it is bitter. You ladle it into a small bowl and set it beside your daughter's sleeping form. She stirs at the scent, blinking, lips chapped and eyes sunken. She doesn't smile. Hasn't in days. But she sits up and takes the bowl with both hands. "Did you eat?" she asks. You nod. Lie. She takes a few bites, careful, watching you the whole time. You force yourself to sip from your own bowl, even though it tastes like boiled weeds, and regret. She doesn't finish hers, yeah. After a few minutes, she sets it down, her hands trembling. "Not hungry," she mumbles. That phrase used to be an annoyance. Now it terrifies you. You beg her gently, quietly, to try a little more. She does for you, but you can see it's an effort, a performance. Later, she sleeps again, and you stare at her unfinished bowl. You should eat it. You're weaker than you've ever been, but you can't. You can't bring yourself to steal her portion even if she left it willingly. So you pour it back into the pot and set it aside for evening. Maybe she'll be stronger later. Maybe you will. You think of your mother years ago during a lean winter. Not a famine, just a hard season. She used to eat the scraps off your plate after you'd gone to bed. Said she'd already eaten. You knew she was lying, but you let her. Now you understand. There's a quiet debate among scholars who study these years, mostly argued from the comfort of warm, well-fed lecture halls. How did peasant families divide food during famine? Did parents feed children first? Did the strongest eat to survive and carry the rest? Or did it come down to luck and cruelty? Who could fight hardest for the last scrap? Some records suggest families tried to keep children alive at all costs. Others hint at darker truths, abandonment, sacrifice, the unthinkable. You know, it's not always noble. Sometimes the hunger gets ahead of your better judgment. There are moments, short, shameful ones, when you look at the food in your hand and tell yourself you need it more. Not because you're selfish, because you're the one who forages, who digs, who cooks. If you collapse, there's no one left to find food at all. It's not a choice you make once, it's one you make every day. A few weeks ago, you heard of a family that rationed food based on usefulness. The grandfather went first. He was the only one who knew how to trap birds. Then the older daughter, who could still walk to the woods. The baby went last. Not because they didn't love her, because she couldn't do anything to help. You remember the look on the mother's face when she told the story, like she was confessing to a crime no one could punish her for. You haven't had to make that kind of decision yet, but the line is getting closer every day. That afternoon you find a bit of relief. Marta brings by a small parcel wrapped in cloth. Inside are 2 soft apples, a handful of dried beans, and miraculously a pinch of salt. She says nothing, just hands it over and leaves. You don't ask why. Maybe she had more than she needed. Maybe she saw the way your daughter was looking at the ground yesterday, like it might open and swallow her whole. You boil the beans slowly, carefully. You save the apples for last. When they're soft, you mash them into a paste and mix in a bit of salt. It smells like autumn, like something your daughter might remember as food. When you offer it to her that evening, Her eyes light up just a little. She eats more than she did that morning, enough to make you exhale for the first time in hours. You eat too quickly the rest of the beans. You don't touch the second apple. That's for tomorrow. As the fire dies down, your daughter whispers, "You first next time." You nod. Lie. That night you dream of an endless table with a single bowl in the center. You and your daughter sit across from each other, both pushing the bowl toward the other. You wake with your stomach still empty, but not your hands. Not yet. You don't notice the singing at first. It's faint. So faint you think it might be the wind or the creaking of old wood under frost. But then it drifts again, softer than breath, winding its way through the morning mist. You pause your hands wrist deep in a bowl of cold water, and you listen. Yes, there it is. A voice, then another, thin, unsteady, but undeniably human. You step outside of the air as zorbial smoke curls from only 2 chimneys in the village today. The rest are dark, silent. The snow hasn't fallen yet, but the sky looks ready, a heavy grey that makes even the crows stop squawking. You follow the sound slowly, cautiously. You don't want to interrupt. You don't want to be seen. You just want to know where it's coming from. It leads you to the edge of the chapel, not the front where the monks hand out soup when the bell rings, but around the side near the crumbled cloister wall where the moss grows thick even in winter. A group has gathered, mostly women, mostly old, kneeling in the cold, their hands clasped tight, eyes closed. Some have rosary beads, others just bits of twine. One has a small wooden cross carved from what looks like a table leg. They're singing in Latin or something close to it. The words are slurred, misshapen from hungry mouths and cracked lips, but the melody holds. It's a lullaby, a funeral, a prayer, maybe all 3. You watch half hidden behind a tree, not sure why you feel so out of place. You've prayed before, of course. Everyone has. It's built into you like hunger. But this is something else. Not desperate pleading, not bargaining, something deeper. A ritual as old as frost. When one of the women notices you, she gestures gently, inviting you to join. You hesitate. Then you kneel beside them, folding your hands together, though you can't feel your fingertips. You don't know the words, but you hum the tune. You don't know the point, but you follow their rhythm. Afterward, no one speaks. They just stand slowly brushing snow from their cloaks. The oldest woman presses something into your palm before turning away. A small pouch, rough cloth tied with string. You nod your thanks. She says nothing, only pats your arm. When you open it later back home, you find dried chamomile and a few strands of what looks like licorice root, enough to brew a single weak tea. It tastes like warmth, even though it barely has any. Your daughter drinks half the cup and sighs. There was singing, she says. You nod, I heard it too. They were praying. Yes, for food, you pause. Maybe for peace. She looks confused. Peace doesn't fill your belly. No, you say, but it helps while you wait. That night she asks for a story. Not a new one, but an old one. Something you told her before all this began. You pick one without thinking. The tale of the little goat that tricked the wolves by singing a lullaby so sweet, the wolves forgot they were hungry. She listens with her eyes closed, breathing slow and shallow. When it ends, she asks if the goat survived. Of course, you lie. She became a queen. She smiles barely. The truth is, song has returned to the village in small, strange ways. You hear it more now these last few weeks. Humming, waiting in line, whispers of old ballads over empty pots, rhymes spoken to children who don't know what they mean anymore. A man passed you yesterday, muttering a poem to himself, a harvest chant from years ago. His eyes were glassy, his mouth dry, but the rhythm of the words still lived in his throat. There's a debate, because of course there is, about how people use superstition and ritual to cope with famine. Some scholars say it was a way to control the uncontrollable. Others believe it was a form of resistance, a way of saying we're still here even when everything else is gone. You don't care which theory wins. All you know is that when your daughter sings to herself in her sleep, the hunger feels a little quieter. Later that week, the snow finally falls. Not heavy, just a dusting like powdered ash across the roofs and fields. Everything goes silent, even the wind. You walk through it with care, your footprints the only ones visible. At the church door, a monk hangs a small bundle of dried herbs on the lintel. Sage and twisted with thread. Protection, he says. From what, you ask? From giving up. You don't laugh, you understand. That evening, a neighbor knocks. Her hands are raw and bleeding from the cold, but she carries a tattered scrap of paper in her fist. She unfolds it and shows you words scribbled down from memory. A hymn her mother used to sing. She asks if you'll help her remember the tune. You do your best. Your daughter joins in. The sound is thin, reedy, off-key, but it grows. By the end, all three of you are humming in the dark. There's no food left that night. No broth, no stew, just water and 2 stale crusts. That the sound lingers even after sleep takes you, a kind of echo in the quiet. Not hunger, not cold, just memory and a voice that refuses to stop speaking. The road is busier than it should be. Not bustling, not crowded. Nothing like the harvest seasons you remember. When carts rolled by thick with hay and laughter, children chasing chickens into ditches, and merchants calling out over sacks of beans. But busier still. The quiet kind of busy. The kind that signals things are breaking loose, things are falling apart. You see them while you're foraging near the tree-ine. Figures moving through the mist along the old road, wrapped in too many layers, bent under bundles and sacks, heads down, feet dragging. Not villagers. You don't recognize their shapes. And these days, you know every face in your village, even the ones you wish you didn't. These are travelers, refugees really, though no one uses that word out loud. They don't stop. They don't ask for directions or food or shelter. They just keep walking slow and steady like ghosts that haven't decided where they're going yet. A man pushing a barrow filled with rags and pots. A woman carrying a limp bundle that might be a child, or maybe just everything she owns. One boy trudging behind the group barefoot in the frost, and his eyes fixed on nothing. You don't call out, you don't wave. You just watch. Later you hear them again, camped in the woods past the far hill, their fire barely flickering in the dusk. You see the smoke first, then the faint sound of voices, no singing, no stories, just the crackle of flame and an occasional cough. That night, you tell your daughter to sleep close to the hearth. You wedge the door shut with the firewood pile. It's not that you expect danger, not exactly. It's just that fear clings to everything now, and you can't afford to be generous. Not anymore. The next morning, the travelers are gone. No trace left behind, but a circle of trampled grass and a burned patch of earth. You check it anyway. Not for them, for what they might have left. A fishbone, a peel, anything. You find a shard of pottery and a rusted spoon. You take the spoon. This isn't new. Not really. You've seen travelers on the road before, wandering monks, soldiers returning home, shepherds pushing flocks to distant markets. But now the movement feels different, heavier. Less like a journey and more like an exodus. There's talk in the village about where they're all coming from. Some say the southern towns are worse off than you are. Others say the river valley flooded again, wiped out the granaries. One man insists he saw carts full of dead being pulled from the next shire over, stacked like cordwood. No priests, no prayers. You try not to listen, but it gets harder each door. Historically, famine didn't just empty bellies. It emptied homes. Whole villages vanished. People fled not just hunger, but disease, war, taxation. There are accounts of hamlets with no one left to bury the dead, of settlements taken over by wandering families who simply moved in and claimed what was abandoned. Some scholars argue that these traveling poor were treated with pity, even kindness. Others point to laws passed specifically to keep them out. Bans on vagrancy on outsiders gathering near markets or wells. Some towns even posted guards at the gates. You wonder which side your village would fall on if you were the one arriving hungry at the edge of it. The truth is, you're not far from becoming them. If the stew runs out, if the roots dry up, if the monks shut their doors for good, there won't be a choice. You'll have to leave too. Join the walking. Wrap your daughter in layers and start down the road with a bundle on your back and no destination. Just the vague idea of somewhere else, but not yet. Not today. You make a trade that afternoon with one of the older women on the East End. She's kept to herself since her husband died, but today she offers you a half-full jar of grease and a dried strip of something that might be pork. You give her 3 pieces of bark bread and the last of your dried sage. You cook it over a small fire, just enough to warm the grease and soften the meat. The smell is rich and fills the hut like memory. Your daughter's eyes go wide. You cut it into thin slices and serve it with a broth made from boiled roots. She chews slowly, reverently. You do the same. It's the closest either of you have come to meet in weeks. After the meal, you sit by the door watching the road again. More travelers pass. A pair of young men with rope belts and patched cloaks are pulling a sled with the child bundled tight. One stops to drink from the stream. You almost go out, almost offer her a sip of the broth. But you don't, you can't. Your daughter watches from the window. Where are they going? She asks. Anywhere. You say, away from here. She nods like that makes sense. And it does far too much. That evening, you sharpen your old knife. Not because you expect to use it, but because it makes you feel like you still have teeth, like you can still say no, still draw a line somewhere in the snow. Your daughter curls against your side and whispers, "We won't leave, will we?" You pause, then lie. No, never. That night, you dream of a road that never ends, a line of people stretching out into the horizon, all walking away from something invisible. You and your daughter are near the front. You don't know where you're headed, only that you can't stop. You wake before dawn, and the spoon you took from their fire is still in your hand. The year they still talk about even now, even through cracked teeth and broken memory, is the Great Famine. Not the one you're in, not this long drawn-out decay. No, the one from over a century ago when the rains never stopped and the sun forgot its name. You remember hearing about it as a child, sitting on a woven mat in front of the fire while your grandmother stirred a pot of something thick and grey. There was no bread, she said. No grain, not a crumb. Mothers smothered their own babies to stop the crying. Men ate their boots and God didn't answer anyone. You thought it was a story then, a horror tale, something to make children finish their lentils. But now you're living in the footnotes of that year, and you've begun to understand that history doesn't need to be loud to be terrifying. It doesn't need bodies in the street or fiery proclamations. Sometimes it just needs silence. Empty fields, bare tables, child with eyes too tired for tears. You sit in the chapel yard with few others, sun barely up, hands folded for warmth more than prayer. Someone has drawn a crude map in the dirt. It marks nearby villages, rumored food sources, places to avoid. One is circled in ash, Alwyn Hollow, supposedly abandoned, supposedly full of stored grain left behind in haste. Of course, it might also be crawling with soldiers or thieves or rats the size of dogs. But desperation has made even fairy tales worth chasing again. A young man to volunteers to go. His sister craves. An older couple offers him dried apples for the journey. You have nothing to give, so you offer a blessing. Words worn down from repetition, but maybe they count for something. On your way home, you pass the steward's house. The windows are shuttered, the smoke rising from the chimney sweet and steady. Rumor says he has stores sealed behind stone walls, a year's worth, maybe more. Some believe he's waiting to sell them at the peak of desperation. Others say he's rationing them for spring planting, like a responsible man should. You don't know which is worse. You sit on your doorstep and watch the sky clear today. The sun, faint and watery, still manages to cast shadows. You close your eyes and turn your face toward it like a starving thing. There's a strange comfort in knowing that famines like this have happened before. Not because it makes things easier, but because it reminds you you're not alone. Not across time. So anyway, the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 stretched across Europe like a slow, relentless tide. Crops failed. Livestock drowned. Roads turned to sludge. Entire regions starved together. Kings prayed. Priests fasted. Nothing changed. People ate seed grain meant for spring, then cats, then dogs. There are accounts, true or not, of people digging up graves, of highwaymen who didn't steal but killed out just for flesh, of women leaving their babies at church steps, not out of cruelty, but because someone else might have a crumb. And yet the world didn't end. That's the part that haunts you more than anything. It kept turning. People adapted, survived or didn't. There's still argument among historians about how deep the famine truly went. Some claim the death toll was exaggerated by later writers, trying to paint a world ripe for religious upheaval. Others say the numbers were under-reported, that villages disappeared entirely, erased not by war or plague, but by simple, ceaseless hunger. The truth probably lies somewhere in the pit between those two extremes, like the last bit of stew scraped from the bottom of a burnt pot, bitter and clinging to the facts only out of spite. You wonder how they talked about it afterward. Those who made it through. Did they mention it in passing with a shrug and a half-joke? Did they teach their children to never trust a warm spring or a kind priest? Did they forget the way people forget things that hurt too much to hold? You look at your daughter now, thinner than she was last month, but still upright, still singing sometimes in her sleep, and you think about what you'll tell her if you both make it through. Will you call it the long winter, the hunger year? Will you name it at all? That evening, the boy who went Towin Hollow returns alone. He carries a small sack, heavier than you'd expect. Inside are parsnips, dried peas, and something miraculous. A wedge of hard cheese wrapped in waxed cloth. He doesn't speak much, just says the place was empty. Door open, no bodies, no fire, like they vanished mid-meal. No one asks questions. The food is divided carefully, fairly. He's given double for the risk. That night, you boil a few of the peas with the rest of your herbs. Your daughter smells it before she sees it. Her eyes go wide. She eats every bite, so do you. And for the first time in weeks, your stomach doesn't hurt afterward. You fall asleep holding her hand, and your last thought before the dream hits is this: we're going to tell this story someday. Not today, not yet, but someday. You never thought you'd get used to the gnawing. In the early weeks of the famine, hunger was a loud, desperate thing. It screamed in your stomach, made your limbs jittery, your thoughts fogged with need. Now it's quieter, more like a dull knock at the door you've learned not to answer. You still feel it, of course, but you ignore it the way you might ignore a tooth that aches only when you smile. You're sitting by the fire again, turning a flat cake of ground-up lentil husks and oat sweepings over the embers. You made it with a drop of the last pig fat Mart gave you, bless her, and water pulled from the stream that hasn't frozen, quite solid yet. Your daughter is still asleep in the corner, her cheeks drawn tight, her breath soft and rhythmic. She lost a tooth yesterday. She cried, not from pain, but because she worries the tooth mother won't make it this winter. You told her the tooth mother is snow-stuck, but will send something soon. A smooth stone, a dream. She believed you. You break the cake in two and set half aside. She'll need it more than you. That's the math now, one bite for her. Maybe one for you if there's more later. You keep asking what the famine has taught you, not just about soil, God, or the brittleness of bone, but about who you are when the last harvest fails and what remains afterward. Once you measured life by plenty. Bushels, jugs, a pantry full by Michaelmas. Now you count absence, what you've gone without, what you still refuse to surrender. You've learned endurance has a shape. Morning hunger, afternoon weakness, a dizzy tilt if you bend too fast. Always that hush before sleep when, for one merciful moment, your body forgets it's starving. Scholars call it subsistence flexibility or coping strategy exhaustion. You live between the two, still coping, simply tired. Outside, the day isn't quite frozen. A watery blue sky, patches of thaw, mud that smells like rotten grass. You kneel at your little cache, brush away stones, and check what you buried last month. 3 dried peas you would not eat. Still there, still whole. You smile, not because it's funny, but because it's absurd that these 3 peas feel richer than anything in the steward's locked cellar. They're not food. They're future. Inside, your daughter wakes, rubs her eyes, and eats her half of the cake slowly. Then, shocking you, she gives back a piece. I'm not hungry, she lies with your old smile. You pretend to believe her. At noon, the village gathers at the old granary. No rations, just orders. The steward announces planting must begin. A long, thin groan passes through the crowd. Who has seed? Who has tools that aren't rust? Who has the strength? You raise your hand anyway. Maybe you'll trade. Maybe you'll dig with a stick. The thought of turning earth on purpose stirs your spine. On the way home, you pass Marta, sharpening a bent spade on a stone. She nods, you nod back. Not a conversation, an agreement. We go on. We risk hope. That evening, you boil water for its steam, just to warm the air. Your daughter watches the fog and says, "It smells like soup," and then softer, "Can we plant something this year?" You unwrap the parcel, the peas. Her eyes light. "Can we eat them?" "We plant them," you say. "What if they don't grow?" "Then we try again." That night you sleep with the peas against your chest like a second heartbeat. Hope isn't soft. It isn't a feeling. It's a decision. You decide to dig, to feed your child first, to save 3 peas when everything screams eat them, to believe dirt remembers. Morning brings a breeze warmer than it should be, scented faintly with wet grass. The frost's gone. In its place, honest mud. You press your fingers into it, it yields. By midday, the word has spread. The thaw is real. No bells, no speeches. Just bodies bent and quiet, turning earth with dull shovels, sticks, hands. The frozen crust breaks like stale bread. Underneath, damp black life. You scratch a narrow row beside the hut. Your daughter cradles the peas like jewels and whispers to them. You press each seed into the soil as if it could bruise. She waters with melted snow. You mark the spot with a crooked stick. It's nothing. It's everything, all around the same liturgy. Marta with her spade. Thomas, scattering something like carrot seed, eyes down. Even the steward opens a sliver of the Lord's land for common planting. Prudence dressed as charity. You work until your back aches, and it feels good, not like joy, but like re-entering your own body. So sunken still here. Night brings inventory, scarred hands from frost. A belly that remembers hunger. New reflexes. You hesitate before eating. Your daughter startles at a dark hearth. You scan the sky each dawn, suspicious. Historians like to draw clean lines, the famine year, as if it ends with a feast. It never does. It ends with a furrow and a prayer you're not sure anyone hears. With rationed crumbs and thin soup, and the knowledge that things might get better. You will carry hunger even when fields are green and heads of grain bow heavy. You will remember your daughter's weight when she was too tired to walk. The quiet of a village with no song. The shame of turning away a beggar when your own pot was empty. You may never trust plenty again. You plant anyway. Weeks later you wake to the smallest miracle. The soil lifting, a split seam, a tip of green. Not a feast, a sprout. Just big enough to be possible. Just small enough to be real. You made it. Not through a night, but through the long cold gut of a year that tested everything. Body, patience, memory, hope. You didn't vanish. You planted anyway. Recovery is not a trumpet. It's a spoon scraping a wooden bowl, a rhythm returning. Wake, work, eat. Sleep. When someone asks what you ate to survive, you'll tell the truth. Bark and roots. Regret and silence, ashen grace, kindness, guilt, memory, and mostly stubborn hope.